Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're navigating some tricky territory.
Definitely. We're looking at where certain personality traits, often linked with psychopathy, intersect with, well, climbing the corporate ladder.
Right. You, our listener, sent over some really thought-provoking material on this. It examines these specific characteristics and how they might actually influence success in business settings.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
So our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is to really get under the skin of what allows certain people to thrive, even rise to the top in these competitive environments.
And we're doing that specifically by looking through this lens of psychopathic traits, examining the, let's say, perceived upsides and the pretty significant dangers, too.
Okay, let's get into it. It feels like there's this paradox here, doesn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Traits we'd normally see as negative, maybe even pathological, seem to sometimes correlate with getting ahead in the business world.
So what are these sources telling us?
Well, they point to a potent mix of traits, things that can be incredibly effective for hitting certain targets, but potentially really harmful for the organization overall.
Okay, let's start with one that grabs attention. Charisma, influence.
Ah, yes. The magnetic leader.
We all know the type, right?
Okay.
That compelling executive. But the material suggests for individuals with these traits, it's not just about being liked, it's calculated.
Exactly. It's an instrument. The self-confidence, the assertiveness, they're key. It often reads as strong leadership, but it can be, well, a performance.
The performance, how so?
They project this absolute certainty, and that can be incredibly persuasive, you know? Think about how often we link quick decisions with competence.
Even if the decision isn't actually well-founded or ethical.
Precisely. And it's not just about faking empathy. Some research talks about emotional mimicry.
Mimicry.
Yeah, subtly mirroring body language, tone, building this false connection, this rapport. It's sophisticated, often not even conscious.
Wow. And that ability to perform emotion? The charm deployed just when needed. It's like they have a script.
Right. Knowing exactly when to turn on the sympathy, to build trust, get people on side.
It really makes you question the basis of trust in some workplaces, doesn't it?
It does. If trust can be manufactured like that, well, what does it say about the stability of our work relationships?
And the sources say they're good observers too.
Very astute. They spot vulnerabilities, desires in others, and then they adapt. They use those weaknesses.
Like social chameleons, figure out what you value, reflect it back, and then leverage it.
Exactly, for their own gain. And it's not just one-on-one. They're also described as willing to take really bold, decisive actions.
Even if the long-term risks are huge.
Yeah. Act now, maybe worry about fallout later. That approach can sometimes deliver those quick wins.
That short-term focus keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It's a recurring theme, and it connects right back to how they present themselves. They craft this image of competence, aligning with what the company seems to value, on the surface at least.
Which makes sense, and companies focus purely on performance metrics, right?
Totally. If it's all about hitting sales targets now, cutting costs now, someone willing to ignore ethics or people's well-being might look like a star performer.
They hit the numbers. Whatever it takes, get promoted.
The system itself can almost reward these traits inadvertently, and in really cutthroat environments, it's even more stark.
How so?
The sources mention actively stirring up competition, creating internal battles where they can then, strategically take out rivals.
That sounds ruthless. And thinking bigger picture, if these individuals get into leadership,
it can really poison the well, can it? That charisma, even if fake, can start to normalize unethical behavior if people see it being rewarded.
the message becomes results at any cost.
Exactly. Ethics become secondary, hitting targets is king. It sets a dangerous precedent.
Okay, let's shift gears. Another really interesting point. Cold-blooded decision-making.
Right, which in the high-pressure corporate world can almost sound like a good thing sometimes.
The sources bring up James Blair's work on how emotions are processed differently.
Yes, his research suggests that brain areas linked to empathy, guilt. They show less activity in people with these traits.
So this reduced capacity for empathy, this different emotional processing, it could actually be an advantage.
In certain situations, yes. Blair suggests they can excel at rational thinking, risk assessment, precisely because they aren't weighed down by the usual emotional baggage that comes with tough calls.
So big layoffs, high-risk investments,
They can make those calls with less emotional turmoil. It might look like clarity, like decisiveness,
prioritizing profit, growth, without hesitation.
and that lower response to fear and anxiety we talked about. It lets them take confident risks others might shy away from. In fast-moving industries, that can seem valuable.
And they bounce back from failure quicker, too. Less emotional response.
Seems so. Experience a setback, recover, move on. Without the regret or self-doubt that might hold others back, it sounds, well, efficient.
But the ethical alarms are ringing pretty loud here.
Absolutely. That impaired emotional processing often leads straight to ethical blind spots. They just don't register the human impact of their choices in the same way.
Which damages relationships, morale,
Hugely. Those layoffs might look good on a balance sheet short term.
but the long-term cost to loyalty, productivity, often ignored. That short-term focus again.
And it kills collaboration. Trust needs empathy. If a leader consistently shows they don't care about others' feelings, teamwork becomes incredibly difficult. They might hit their targets, but they risk isolating themselves.
Which brings us nicely to fearless risk-taking. Kevin Dutton talks about this in The Wisdom of Psychopaths.
Right. Dutton's argument is interesting that some psychopathic traits can be useful in specific contexts, but the extremes are damaging.
And fearless risk-taking. Sounds like it could lead to massive success or total disaster.
Dutton highlights how that reduced experience of fear, that willingness to take risks others avoid, is key. Their brains just react differently to uncertainty. They stay calmer.
You can see the upside in certain situations, can't you? Launching something totally new, entering a risky market.
That lack of fear could be the very thing that lets them take the plunge when others hesitate. It can spark innovation.
So it's not just more risk, but maybe different kinds? Are they less likely to do the boring due diligence because they don't fear failure as much?
That's a real possibility. They might seize opportunities others see as too dangerous, but, as Dutton also warns, that same fearlessness, without caution or thinking long-term, it's incredibly risky.
The short-term focus again. Underestimating the potential for things to go badly wrong.
It's like driving a sports car with no brakes, isn't it? You go fast, but a crash feels likely.
And the source's stress balancing risk with proper evaluation, risk management, which doesn't sound like their natural inclination.
Not really. The judgments are fast, but not always deep. Plus, the thrill of the risk itself might be rewarding for them.
And for the organization. Having leaders making impulsive, high-stakes bets.
It creates stressful environments, erodes morale. People feel unsafe when decisions seem reckless.
Let's unpack the self-centered goal achievement aspect, that intense focus on personal objectives.
Yeah, everything else seems secondary. Blair's research comes up again, the lack of empathy, the lack of ethical breaks. It lets them prioritize their own goals single-mindedly, often at others' expense.
Using that calculated, emotion-free planning we mentioned.
Exactly. So things like exploiting colleagues, manipulating people, even stealing credit, they become just tactics, tools to get ahead.
And in competitive places, that ruthless focus probably works, short-term at least.
Definitely. And they can make those really tough decisions like layoffs, apparently without the emotional toll it takes on others.
From their view, it's just strategic, a means to an end.
But the long-term damage to the company culture, to trust, collaboration, it's often immense.
It sounds incredibly transactional. People as pawns.
Pretty much. And that lack of remorse is critical, isn't it? It allows them to manipulate and exploit without hesitation. No guilt holding them back.
And it connects to fearlessness, too. Not worried about social fallout or ethical judgments.
Right. They're not constrained by those things in the same way. Plus, they're usually good at self-promotion, making sure everyone sees their wins.
Okay, let's dig into the lack of empathy and strategic thinking link. Seems counterintuitive, but the sources suggest it can actually enable a certain kind of cold, rational strategy.
Dutton's ideas fit here. Not being burdened by emotions allows a focus purely on the strategic angle, a detachment that enables a different kind of analysis, prioritizing logic, outcomes, over feelings.
We see it in things like restructuring, maybe, cost cutting.
Exactly. While others wrestle with the human cost, someone with less empathy can make those profit-driven choices quickly, decisively. It's that separation of emotions from actions.
And that helps in outplaying competitors, too.
Potentially. If you're not bound by ethics or worried about impact, you might use tactics others wouldn't consider. Gives you an edge, perhaps.
In things like mergers, acquisitions, big investments, that calculated rationality could look very attractive.
It could. But again, the ethical red flags are huge, using unethical tactics like fraud, manipulating information. It might win a battle, but it can destroy reputation and lead to legal trouble long term.
And the internal damage.
Just as bad. Lack of empathy at the top corrodes trust, shuts down communication, kills the collaborative spirit needed for long-term health.
The sources also mention adaptability. Situational judgment. That seems incredibly valuable today.
It really does. Business changes so fast. Being able to adapt quickly, make good calls under pressure. It's key.
And the resistance to emotional influence helps here.
Seems so. They say calmer, more responsive when things get uncertain. Others might freeze up or cling to old ways. Dutton's idea of emotional detachment being useful in crises fits.
So market shifts, major disruptions, they can analyze it coolly, make decisions fast.
Without being tied to the past emotionally, their focus is just on the best move now, identifying new opportunities, adopting new strategies without that emotional inertia.
And their situational judgment, reading the room, making quick calls.
Crucial in those moments. Think high-stakes negotiations, crisis management. They can quickly assess power dynamics, figure out who to influence, make decisive, maybe unpopular moves.
Sounds especially useful during big organizational changes. They can provide that steady hand.
They can project that, yes, even amidst uncertainty and resistance, but
The ethical caveat again.
always, that same lack of empathy fueling adaptability can lead to unethical actions if they think it serves the goal in that situation.
It's the constant theme, isn't it? Useful traits, potentially twisted, used without a moral compass. What about this idea of cleverly utilizing talent?
Yeah, it's not just having skills, but knowing how to deploy them strategically and managing perception.
Dutton's research mentions their awareness of their image.
Yes, they're strategic about self-presentation, showcasing strength, hiding weaknesses. They read expectations and adjust their persona. It's like managing their personal brand constantly.
Knowing when to be assertive, when
Yeah.
to seem collaborative.
How to dress, speak, projecting success. That social intelligence we talked about is vital here. Reading people, manipulating situations.
And being less emotional helps them perform well under pressure.
Right. Not distracted by nerves or doubt, just focused on executing effectively. And they're good at hiding flaws, maybe through delegation, making sure only their strengths are visible.
That mix of cold rationality and fearlessness seems key to making the most of their talents.
Definitely. Not afraid to take bold steps to showcase abilities, get ahead, and they network effectively too.
Building useful connections.
Yes, they understand the power of networks and navigate them well, sometimes manipulating those relationships too, often at the expense of real trust, leading to potential ethical issues.
Okay, finally, strong self-belief.
Mm.
Persuasiveness seems essential for getting ahead.
Absolutely. The sources, referencing Blair, highlight this unwavering self-assessment they often have.
High self-belief, unaffected by criticism.
It's a huge asset in leadership, real or perceived. Helps them make decisive choices, project authority. Blair suggests being less swayed by emotions contributes to that confidence.
And that belief makes them more persuasive.
It really does. Someone speaking with such conviction, it's convincing. Even if the substance is shaky, they instill assurance, especially when things are uncertain.
So they can influence people even without empathy.
It's a key leadership trait, yes, but with that potential dark side. Rallying support, pushing through strategies based on sheer force of will.
And in a crisis, that steady demeanor is reassuring.
Even if it masks a lack of real concern, yes.
Yeah.
That self-belief often means a clear vision, determination, regardless of obstacles or impact.
And being indifferent to criticism or failure must be freeing in a way.
Lets them keep pushing, bounce back. That resilience, combined with unwavering self-belief, really contributes to their impact.
So wrapping this up, it's a really complex picture. Charisma, cold decision-making, fearlessness, self-focus, lack of empathy, adaptability, cleverness, self-belief.
All can contribute to what looks like corporate success.
But as the sources clearly show, these traits, when rooted in psychopathy, come with huge ethical costs and long-term dangers.
That intense focus on short-term wins, often ignoring the long game, ethics, and that indifference to social norms, it really highlights the potential for serious damage.
They might climb fast, get impressive results quickly.
But the foundations can be incredibly unstable, built on shaky ground.
Absolutely. Which leaves us and you, our listener, with a final thought to consider. Reflecting on all this, what are the real long-term implications for companies that prioritize or maybe just inadvertently reward these kinds of characteristics, the ones tied to short-term gains, individual advancement?
What hidden costs might be piling up under the surface of that apparent success?
It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.